Right now, our world, our lives, and most of the things we encounter on a day-to-day basis are shaped by three assumptions when it comes to AI. First, artificial intelligence has something to do with intelligence. Second, the large language models we have, like ChatGPT, will eventually lead to human intelligence, or AGI. And third, either way, we will get to artificial general intelligence. Well, I'm here to tell you that's all BS. I wanted to make this video for a very long time, but the things I'm going to talk about today are so hidden from plain sight and are so incredibly subtle that it took me a long time to unearth them and sort them in a way so it will finally become possible to present the true picture to you. And if, and I know that's a big if, you make it through the end of this video, you will have a deeper understanding of AI that will surpass the understanding of the people you interact with on a day-to-day basis by a mile. A mile doesn't even do it justice. So let's dive in really deep and uncover why these three assumptions on which trillions of dollars and millions of lives increasingly center around are not more than blown out of proportion marketing. Let me ask you a question. If I have an apartment with a bunch of furniture and you come in and rearrange all my furniture in my apartment, is it suddenly a new apartment? Or is it your apartment? No, it's not. It's still the same apartment. Just the furniture now is standing over there instead of over here. That is exactly what our current AI systems are doing. They are learning from gigantic datasets that my pots and pans usually go in the kitchen. That's all there is. All they do is predict plausible outputs. And you should remember that word plausible because it's quite essential. They predict plausible outcomes based on statistical patterns which they have learned from said datasets. The outcome then sounds right, or in cases of pictures and videos, looks right, but the AI itself doesn't know if they are. Not only doesn't it know, it doesn't care. It was never built to care, because caring about the truth and generating plausible outcomes are actually two very different mechanics. One system is enclosed in itself and inward-looking, and one system is open and outward-looking. So in order for AI to produce its insanely great-looking outputs, it follows three steps in that inward-looking system. First, it gets a request, a prompt that demands an output, like what should I do to surprise my girlfriend? It then calculates, based on this prompt and based on its dataset, what outcomes are most likely to follow once someone poses a question or a request like that. In our example, what words usually come after "I want to surprise my girlfriend, so I put an alligator in her bed"? No, why would I do that? And third, it presents from its enclosed system the output. Again, in our example, it found that the most likely words after "I want to surprise my girlfriend, so I bought her flowers." Surprise! This output always stands in relationship with only two entities, the prompt and the dataset. The truth or reality is not in that equation. AI can only tell if the prompt fits to its output. It cannot tell if what it produces is actually true. Let's pause for a second and have a hypothetical discussion with the skeptics who might have two major objections to what I just said. The first one being, well, AI might not be able to tell, but I am, and if I think it's true and when I find it useful, then it sure as hell is. Well, a response like that not only perfectly summarizes the problem, people who give a response like that don't even know about the value of intelligent outputs. People who think that way do not have the ability to understand the value of what is actually right and what sounds right. But this missing value is what will get us in trouble. And if you are curious how it will get us in trouble specifically, you can watch this video. I will also link it at the end of this one right here. And the second more technical objection might be, well, I already know where this is going. We just need to enlarge the dataset and make it more current by allowing AI to see the person asking, to know the relationship, to give it maximum access. But still, this will not work, because the way AI works in its programming can only be backward looking. It always has to ask, what was it like, in order to predict what will it most likely be like? Because the value of truly intelligent outputs stem from it being forward-looking. But in order to be able to do that, to be able to be forward-looking, AI would need something it can never acquire. And what that is becomes clear when we compare real intelligence against the behavior of AI. So why is intelligence different from that? In what way? True understanding means more than simply producing plausible outcomes. You see, truly intelligent outcomes have a value in them we seem to have forgotten or maybe never knew in the first place because we didn't have anything to compare it to, since there only was intelligence or non-intelligence. Right? It always has been living on a scale between stupid and intelligent, so it was binary. There wasn't a third form of false intelligence, which makes it not as straightforward now. But it's this hidden value of truly intelligent outputs that makes the single biggest difference. When making this video, I thought I could explain this quite easily by simply showing you an eclectic definition of intelligence. But it turns out there is none. There are many, but depending on what field of science you are looking for it differs a lot. But if we take together the most common definitions of intelligence, we arrive at something like this. Intelligence is the capacity of a system to achieve goals across varied environments by learning, adapting, and using information to model and influence reality. Now let's go through the single elements here to see where AI falls short, and maybe you already caught it. So we do have a system, the AI, and a goal, which is the prompt. We have varied environments, it can be different prompts or text versus image and video, and we have learning and adapting, which it all can do. Using information, which we also have, that is the data set, and the ability to model, which again is the statistical pattern recognition and extrapolation towards the output. So not much left, except one thing: to influence reality. These are actually two things AI cannot do, because the value of true intelligence is in its outward-driven system, which we touched upon shortly before. And this outward-driven nature comes from two elements. First, based in reality. As we already said, AI has no grasp of reality. It doesn't need to in its closed system. But true intelligence needs reality. And I cannot believe I have to explain this on such a fundamental level. Why is reality important to make outputs valuable? You see, reality exists. Sometimes we seem to be quicker to find common ground here than in other instances, but it exists, okay? So let's make an example. Gravity exists, I cannot fly. These are two realities that exist on their own. But most of the time, they are not interacting. I'm walking to work, I take the bus, I don't need to fly. But if a system gives me an output that says the quickest way for me to get to work is to fly and I should step out of the window and spread my wings, suddenly the reality of gravity is waiting for me. And if the system doesn't know about that reality or care, I will die. Now, this is a super basic example, but all it says is reality exists around us and is non-negotiable. And it kind of pays off to take it into account, because once we set anything in motion, reality is waiting for us to either help or destroy us. In an easy example like gravity, that instantaneously makes sense. But if the relationship between what I'm trying to do and reality gets more complex, the value seems to be more and more forgotten. Like a random example. The reason why central bank independence matters is because it keeps money creation and interest rate decisions separated from short-term political pressure. Without that independence, governments could effectively print money, leading to inflation, volatile rates, currency weakness, and a loss of trust in the monetary system itself, followed by a total collapse of the economy. That reality is waiting for us. Just as gravity, but it's not as obvious. And whenever reality isn't as obvious to us, the value of outputs by a system based on reality are easier to neglect. Right, maybe hypothetically you could argue that if you gave AI 100% access to the world's data, it could know what reality is. That's impossible in practice because feelings, moods, and flows of the human mind are super context dependent and always shifting, so you would never achieve 100%, but theoretically you could make that argument. But it's missing the second key element. If you remember, I said to influence reality are two things AI doesn't have. So it doesn't have reality, and the other element that it can never obtain is intent. As we said, intelligence does what it does, learn, adapt, model, etc., to influence reality. So hidden beneath all the technical stuff is a real human core, intent. But why does real intelligence and intelligent output need intent to provide value? This is where it gets fun, because intent in itself requires three linked elements: intrinsic goals, the outcome matters to the system itself, ownership of consequences, outcomes affect the system itself, and context dependency. Outcomes refer to a world the system inhabits. Human intelligence does not model the world around us just because. We model it because our survival depends on it. You might not consciously realize it all the time, but every single decision you make has one thing in common. It's always in relationship to your survival. Even if you think about decisions of self-sacrifice, to protect someone you love, even that is a decision in relationship to your survival. One where you decide against it. Happens. But that's the extreme. In daily life, every response you give always is in one way or the other linked to your survival, through millions of little variables that are impossible to consciously name or, even realize. But that constant weighing process is hardwired in our nature. So whenever you ask another human anything, their response will be weighed against their survival. It's a judgment filtered through a breathing and living stake. And that is where the value comes from. Because an answer shaped by survival is not only trying to be plausible, it's trying to be either safe, risky, useful, hindering, etc. And hence, always intentional. Our responses have been tested, not in databases, but in thousands of lifetimes of consequences. Embarrassment, hunger, rejection, trust, danger, love, regret. Human intelligence is a map drawn by generations of apes and humans who have died because of their decisions. And that makes our reasoning valuable. We ignore elegant ideas that would get us hurt. We distrust stories that feel too convenient. We privilege what keeps relationships, bodies, and futures intact. Without that anchor, that ultimate stake, intelligence becomes artificial, able to generate endless possibilities, but unable to care which ones should be chosen. Only survival turns information into meaning. It tells the mind what to keep, what to doubt, and what to defend, even when it's uncomfortable. So the value of human intelligence is not raw processing power. It's that every thought is accountable to a life that must continue after you have given your answer. So if we look at the three elements of intent, intrinsic goals, ownership of consequences, and context dependency, yes, you can program an AI to have certain intrinsic goals. The current LLMs have the goal to optimize for statistical probability. Yes, you can give AI more context and tell it to always relate to that context, more data, more access. Sure, at least theoretically, but what it will never have is the ownership of consequences. And the funny thing is that it's so obvious, because why it will never have ownership of consequences is the simple fact of its nature. Alright, this sounds really cryptic. Let's get technical. Let's get specific and answer the two relevant questions to completely understand the thing we created, AI, or what we are trying to create, AGI, Artificial General Intelligence. Why will LLMs, no matter how advanced we make them, not suddenly evolve into true general intelligence? Why will we never be able to create human-like AGI at all? So the very obvious argument of the true value of intelligent answers, coming from the very nature of how intelligence was formed, might not be convincing to everybody. So let's play the devil's advocate here. Sure, maybe the current AIs aren't truly intelligent. Yet. But if we just keep scaling them up, bigger models, more data, more computational power, won't we eventually get to something that essentially is as intelligent as a human human or even more so? Isn't that the path to AGI, artificial general intelligence? No, it's not. Bye. Alright, simply making these models bigger and train them on more data is not going to magically transform them into a human-like general intelligence. LLMs will never reach AGI because they are built on fundamentally the wrong foundations for it. Think about how a human child becomes an intelligent adult. Sure, we absorb a lot of data, experiences, lessons, facts, but we also interact with the world at every step. We poke our environment, the cat, we experiment, get hit by the cat. We learn cause and effect by doing, not just by reading or watching. If a child only ever read books about riding a bicycle but never actually tried to ride one, do you think you could just hop on a bike and be proficient? Highly unlikely. They need to form a physical muscle memory, trial and error understanding of balance. LLMs, no matter how you tweak them, are fundamentally stuck in a paradigm of passive absorption and pattern recognition. They learn from recorded data, essentially traces of other people's actions and thoughts, but they themselves do not act in the world or see the results of any action. They don't get any action. Lame. They have no concept of experimenting. They can't form new hypotheses and then go out and test them. They only infer correlations from the data that's given. They're like someone who's read the entire internet but has never stepped outside. I know a lot of people like that. This has three implications. First, they can't build genuine causal models of how the world works because they never get the feedback of cause and effect from reality. They see A happened, then B happened in text, but they don't truly know if A caused B or if it was a coincidence or fiction. Second, they can't tell appearance from reality. If all they see is language, they'll treat a well-written fiction story about dragons the same way as a factual historical account. As long as both were part of the training data, just like in our real world, both are kind of in our real world. They don't have a discriminator for truth because everything in the training text was just words to predict. Now sure, we do some post-training alignment to try to curb obvious falsehoods, but that still doesn't give the model an actual understanding. It's more like additional rules of thumb it tries to follow. If you train an AI on data up to 2021 and then ask it about an event in 2023, it doesn't magically know about that event unless it was updated with the new data. And even if you pipe in live updates, it's still just going to incorporate those into its statistical web. It won't truly comprehend the significance unless that too was spelled out in the data it read. Real general intelligence can notice when something is off or when conditions have changed drastically and adapt its thinking. And a lot of thinking is actually non-verbal. A pure verbal data-driven model only knows what it reads. But let's get even freakier. Robots. Even efforts to attach LLMs to things like vision, so it can process images or video, or robotics, so it can poke the cat, they will run into the core issue. The learning process is still see input, predict output. You might give it more modalities, images, sound, etc. But if the underlying training objective remains predict the next chunk of data, it's not suddenly going to develop a will of its own or a deep understanding. You're just feeding it more complex patterns to chew on. True general intelligence, the kind humans have, requires learning from something deeper than just data patterns. It requires learning from actual consequences. From trying things and sometimes failing, from forming abstract concepts that aren't just words but have embodied meaning. For example, we have a concept of gravity, not just as a word in a sentence, but as that force that made us fall off the playground slide and hurt ourselves and made us bump our head, which we still suffer from. We learned it through experience long before we learned the word gravity. And some of us seem to even think it doesn't exist. What the hell is AI to make of this? The next word predictor, however large, is not designed to ever acquire that kind of knowledge. It doesn't live in the world, it lives in text. No matter how many books about gravity it reads, it has never felt weight. No matter how many stories about heartbreak it reads, it has never felt love or loss. It's all second-hand patternized information. So scaling up this approach is just going to produce a bigger and fancier parrot. It might sound more and more convincing, it might even perform very complex tasks by sheer statistical cleverness, but it will always be an imitation of understanding rather than real understanding. We could make LLMs that score higher on tests than any human, and it could still be fundamentally clueless about the simplest real-world truth outside those test questions, because it doesn't know in the way a sentient being knows. To achieve AGI, we would likely need a completely different approach, one that involves embodied learning, trial and error, and a drive on its own. We will never be able to produce a human-style AGI. Seems to be a hot take and, goes against a lot of sci-fi dreams and tech industry promises, but it's really quite simple if you ignore all the noise around AI for a minute. The reason lies in something fundamental about computation versus living minds. A computer, even a future super advanced AI, is ultimately a machine manipulating symbols and data. It's a describer of the world, not a self in the world. It can hold a representation of a state, say a number that represents its health or status, but that representation is just data. It doesn't feel that state. A digital system is, by its nature, infinitely replaceable and resettable. If you have a software program running and you don't like what it's doing, you can copy it, you can restore it from a backup, you can run 2 instances of it side by side. If the program dies, crashes, you can just start it up again. The only reason one copy might behave differently is because of randomness or different inputs. But there's nothing unique that's lost when a copy is lost, because you have the blueprint to recreate it exactly. Contrast that with you. You are not replaceable. Aw, isn't that sweet? You're watching a video about AI and someone tells you you are not replaceable. Cute. Well, it's true. If you die, that's it. There's no bringing exactly you back. Even an identical twin is not you. A clone would not be you. There's a singular continuity to your existence. This gives you and every living thing a built-in drive. Avoid death, avoid destruction, seek conditions that prolong life. This is our survival instinct, and it's the bedrock of all goals and intentions we have. Now imagine trying to program a computer to have a survival instinct. You could tell a robot or an AI, don't let yourself be shut down. You could even give it sensors to detect when its battery is low and somebody is coming trying to push the button. It might appear to have a survival instinct, but does it really? If we shut it down and turn it back on, it's ultimately none the wiser. If we copy its memory and boot up a clone, that clone picks up where it left off. There is no singular self in there that experiences the continuity or cares inherently about it. And by the way, all those stories of LLMs trying to break free and deceive the operator to stay alive, these stories will go down as urban myths like the 2 missing ribs of Marilyn Manson. The LLM is pretending. Don't forget that. But even if we put a rule like try not to be turned off into an AI's programming, that's just a goal we, the designer, gave it. The AI might execute behaviors to satisfy that goal, like, backing itself up or pleading with you not to unplug it in a very advanced scenario, but it's following a script. It's not actually afraid of being turned off. It can't be, because in the grand scheme, it isn't alive. It's running code that can always be started anew. Its life is not a singular, unrepeatable experience. It's a process that can be halted and replicated and resumed. To put it another way, for a machine there is ultimately no irreversible consequence. If it loses, we can set it back to an earlier state. If it dies, we can run another instance. We can literally have it running in 2 places at once, something utterly impossible for a single conscious being, because a digital mind's identity is just information. And information can be copied perfectly. Intelligence, the way we humans have it, some humans I should say, is intertwined with the fact that we cannot be copied or restored. We have one shot. There is no backup for a mind that can be loaded if your brain breaks. That's why stakes exist for us. That's why meaning exists. When an AI has a loss function, like the one thing it tries to minimize during training, that loss is just a number in a database somewhere. If the number's too high, we tweak some parameters and run it again. The AI isn't suffering when the loss is high, but when you or I lose, whether it's failing at a job, losing a friend, or at the extreme losing our life, there is real suffering, real irreversible consequence. That is the bedrock that gives rise to everything we've been talking about: intent, understanding, and meaning. Now, could some future technology create a machine that does have an irreversible, uncopyable existence? Perhaps some exotic non-digital computer that can't be duplicated? We are really overdoing the diabolus and advocating here, but let's pretend that's possible. Even then, with our understanding of what machines are, the fundamental paradigms we have in our world, and any foreseeable one, any AI we build is always going to be a reversible process. We can pause it, copy it, resume it, and as long as that is true, it can never truly have skin in the game the way a human does. It will always be missing that fundamental stake that, as we said, is required for general intelligence with real understanding. What we can build are more and more sophisticated optimization machines. We can make AIs that mimic self-preservation. For example, an AI might learn to act as if it doesn't want to be shut down because acting that way tends to keep it running longer. It's been trained or reinforced to avoid triggers that get it shut off. But that's like a thermostat that wants to keep your house warm. It doesn't really want anything, it's just following a rule that happens to align with what we'd call a desire or purpose. It's mimicking. It's not the real thing. So the bottom line is, without a living, irreproducible, consequence-bearing core, no amount of clever code or massive training data will create a mind that is truly like the human mind. We can get extremely powerful automation that does tasks we used to think required intelligence. But in the end, it's not general, self-directed intelligence at all. It's just fake. So thank you for watching this video. I hope you liked it. If you did, consider commenting, subscribing, or liking the video. It really does help the channel a bunch. If you didn't like it, please feel free to comment your argument or disappointment. Both is fine. A big shout out to the Epic Opaque channel members. Thank you for your unwavering support. I'm actively working on coming up with some exclusive material I might be able to add in the future. And for anyone who wants to know what consequences you and I will face because of a lot of people don't get the difference between AI and real intelligence, you will like this video. Here we look at the implications on creativity and culture, education and knowledge, as well as business and the economy. And I'm sorry to say, it will affect all of us. See you next time.